Hey, for those that may not have been here last week, we took time out. We talk a lot around here about taking water. It's really a metaphor, water is, for anything that you have within your disposal, any kind of resource, whether it's your time, your skills, your money. People just make a difference with these different things in their world. We call that water. Anything that the universe can use to make your world better. When you do that thing, we call it taking water. And so last week we honored some different people, but there was a person that we never had a chance to present to. And so we had determined in advance, we said, you know what, next week we're going to present that award. And so this morning, I want to do that. I want to just take a moment right now. You know, the average, we have 100, last time I checked, we have 114 volunteers that power up different parts of Friends Church. I don't know if you realize that, but we have so many different teams that are working. Some of them you'll see on the front end when you walk in the doors here, but there are so many behind the scenes people that are doing different things all over. The average volunteer at Friends Church will do, say, a shift about every 4 to 6 weeks. That's kind of the rotation that most volunteers are on. Within a shift, they'll maybe serve 3 hours. 3 to 4 hours. The average volunteer over a year will invest anywhere from, say, 26 up to about 40 hours in a year, serving some way, using their gifts and talents to make a difference, to help other people enjoy or to experience what we're creating here at Friends Church in some way. And so we're always saying thank you. We had this big volunteer appreciation thing last weekend, brought a whole bunch of them together, and it was great. But this one person that I want to acknowledge today volunteers. We started adding up. This person volunteers 2 out of every 3 weeks. When it's all totaled up, I was just running the math this week. Over 171 hours of volunteer time this person has been logging at Friends Church, not just for the last year, but he's been involved serving in this way for, well, we were trying to do the math in terms of how long it's been. It's been a long time. Ever since we were back at Masters, and we've been here 11 years, so it's going back. Anyways, folks, I was talking to the team who know this guy. And I was just saying, what are your thoughts on this guy? So one guy wrote me an email. He said, this is what I got to tell you about this guy. Even though he's usually a few minutes late, he's here. He's here every single time he's needed. He quietly brings his incredible music brain to not only rock the low end, but to help all members of his teams bring better music to Friends Church. He does it with all without fanfare, without the need for praise. He's the first person to start tearing down gear, and usually he's the last to finish up. If Peter, the disciple, was the rock of the church, Dave is the rock and roll rock of many Friends Church music teams, now and for many years past, and hopefully for many years to come. Folks, I would love you to put your hands together and show our appreciation to David Anderson. We're presenting him with the It's All About the Bass Award. Congratulations, my friend. Yeah, we're thankful, man. Thankful for you. Love it. Hey, there are so many different people we'll thank, and we will take turns in thanking and acknowledging all the different people that do this, but we appreciate you, Dave. Appreciate all you do. Right on. Well, once again, good morning, everyone. Glad you're here. We began a new series this morning. I want to begin by asking a question. If you were to turn the dial up on your spiritual journey, the intentions of your spirituality, saying, man, I want to take this seriously. Like, let's face it, you're showing up for a reason. You're not just here for giggles, right? You're coming here to take something in, to perhaps learn something, to perhaps have some part of your life change or grow. If you were to turn up the dial and give yourself a year of concentrated effort in the spiritual gym, what would change in your life? How would you look different a year later? If for someone that hadn't watched you or studied your life for a year, while you've been in the gym, and then they all of a sudden see you at the end of it, a year later, what would they notice? That's a good question, isn't it? I was so worried, actually, that little Tina was going to grab on my poppy and cut her finger with that. We're beginning this new series this morning called Spiritual Ninja Training. We're talking about the core competencies of what we think some of the spiritual masters, the gurus, we call them the ninjas, how they operate in life. What are the core competencies of someone who has been religiously in the gym working at their spiritual life? What looks different about these kinds of people who have developed their spiritual lives in powerful ways? What is it they do differently? How is it that they live differently? Had some interesting conversations around this very question with some people over the last little while. Ask them, if you were just to ratchet up that dial, what do you think would change? And it's funny. A couple of them have kind of went, hey, hang on. I do want to dial it up, but I still want to have a little fun too, okay? I found that interesting. How many have actually thought that at different times? I would like to live a more spiritual life, but I don't want to give up all the fun either in my life. I want to have a little. How many have somehow seen perhaps spirituality and pleasure kind of, it's one or the other? There's certain things about that are going to go away if I ratchet it up over here. I know I have. There have been different times throughout my life where I've felt like it kind of is a little bit one or the other. I think it's a common belief. I've wondered, how much fun can you have without it affecting your spiritual journey? A number of years ago, a close friend of mine surprised me. She invited me to join her and her partner and a few other friends on a golf experience that most real golfers would give their right arm for. A limousine rolled up to my house at 7:30 one morning. I had my golf bag in my hand, my cap on, golf shoes in hand. We jumped into that limo. They drove us straight to a private airstrip out at the Calgary airport. We boarded a private jet. We flew down into Montana, landed on an airstrip, big Suburban waiting for us, jumped into that Suburban, drove onto one of the nicest golf courses in all of Montana. And we golfed 18 holes on this unbelievable course. I was pinching myself all day. I'm just like, I cannot believe this. We got back, we went in, we cleaned up, we walked into the dining room of this beautiful country club, and they had this beautiful meal laid out. We sat back. I'm just looking at these people just going, I can't believe you let me come and experience something. This is so amazing. We finished up the meal, some nice wine. Suburban was waiting. Our golf clubs were all packed up, drove us to the airstrip. We jumped on that jet, back to Calgary. Limousine dropped me off at my home, and I was in bed by about 10:30 that night. Is an extravagant pleasure like that, is that kind of antithetical to like a truly spiritual person? Is there something wrong with experiencing something that exorbitant? Let me tell you another story. A hockey buddy of mine told me about a weekend in Vegas that he had planned. He had mapped it out, him and his partner and a number of their friends were all heading down for a weekend. First night, they were going to go out on the town. They had a couple clubs picked out. There was some partying planned. And they were going to go hard. And then the next day, they were going to be at the pool at the hotel. Then that night, they were going to go to a beautiful restaurant and enjoy a 5-star meal, and then they're going to go from there to a big show. The next morning, they would get up, spend a little more time around the pool before they would fly out that night. Good times. Lots of fun, lots of music, probably lots of drinking. Great times with friends. Spiritual? Anti-spiritual? Getting in the way? I bet if we were to poll our community about the kinds of desires and pleasures that you would like to experience in your own personal life, the pleasures that you kind of go, oh man, I'd love to do this or this, that list would be crazy long. I wanted to do that polling thing, but I thought about it too late. I'd love to have you guys texting in. What are the things you're going, oh man, if I had my way, this would be it, this would be it, what would it look like? The desires and secret pleasures within this crew? But the list would be long. But do any of those things get in the way of your spirituality? Are there desires of yours that are incompatible, that would disqualify you? For some of us who grew up in religious circles, we were told, some of us were told, that pleasure-seeking, longing to have certain desires met in our lives was not spiritual business. In fact, organized religion, for those of us, perhaps you in the community here, you've grown up in maybe some church circles, you've been warned about seeking pleasures. I remember being taught a verse like this out of Galatians, instructing us to walk by the Spirit and don't you dare gratify the desires of the flesh. Those desires to go out and have fun like everyone else. I was in high school learning verses like this. Don't you be going to the dances. Don't be going out and partying, drinking. Don't be listening to that rock music. Yeah. And sex, come on. Don't even think it. All these people having a good time, but the church is saying, don't do it. Because that is not part of the spiritual life. You can't do whatever you want. Some of those desires you got, they're in conflict with what God wants for you. Right from the origin story of Adam and Eve who gave in to the temptation. Boy, they wanted that apple. It's like, oh, God's going, don't do it. What do? They go and give in and get booted out of the garden. Throughout the stories of the Bible, you'll see people being warned. Don't, not them, don't do this, don't do that. People wrestling with these temptations. I think there were some good warnings, but boy, I tell you, there was a lot of shame around some people that stepped into some stuff or even wanted. What many aren't aware of is that within the verses, many of the verses of the Bible, there is a narrative that was very strong in the day and age that those verses were written. It helps to understand this as you kind of decode some of the verses that we read surrounding pleasure. See, back in that day, they saw the world very divided into two big realms. If you're thinking Lord of the Rings, you got Gandalf, right? And the world of good, right? He's the good guy, the force of goodness. And then over here, you got Sauron, darkness, evil, and his minions, right? You see some of that stuff, it's just like, ooh, I remember our kids were half traumatized when those orcs start coming out. It's like, the darkness, the realm of darkness in the world is so personified At that time, boy, there was a warning. There is good, but then there is evil, and evil will come in. The forces of evil will try to tempt you into behavior that will suck you in, will steal your soul. So you're wanting these things, don't do it. They're evil. The appetites, the desires for pleasure, watch out. That will lead you into a bad place. This binary understanding of the world was so common at that time. I mean, you just read this passage from Ephesians. Our struggle isn't against flesh and blood. It's not against you and me. There's some dark forces out there, and they are working away at you. And you better watch it. They are going to eat your lunch. All kinds of rules were developed within religion to guard people against getting sucked into pleasures. And depending on how traditional of environment your religious upbringing was, man, some of the rules got really crazy. Like, you can't play cards. I mean, there was a card check, right? Rook was allowed, but face cards, well, no. My parents tell all these kinds of stories of all these different rules that weren't allowed. And I was just coming out of the tail end of it. I was a treasurer in a high school, and I was kind of incognito, not letting my church know that I was at the dance, collecting the money, paying the band, doing all these different things, because technically I shouldn't have been there, according to the church. There's some kind of darkness lurking for me. These rules spread out into so many different areas, man. It's like in sex. Oh, man, could there have been anything worse? Which is really confusing, right? Like, as a 10, 11-year-old kid watching a movie, all of a sudden the sex scene's on, and my parents are like running for the TV to cover up, keep us from seeing something. We're like, wait, what was that? That looked exciting. But we're like, ooh. So anytime there was any kind of sexual excitement, the shame. It's like, ooh. Even to this day, when we talk about sex in church here, many people stay away. They're like, doesn't seem like it fits at church. This is awkward. We got a problem with pleasure and church, pleasure and spirituality. And as a result, things get weird. It's like people start thinking that they have to live their church life and live their own separate life away from the church that no one knows about, because somehow they're incompatible. You know what I'm saying? It happens. Sometimes it happens in very obvious ways. Sometimes it happens just subtle, emotional ways where people aren't, and so it affects even how you talk with your kids about it, how you talk about your own desires in life, especially when it's in the context of your spirituality. It's like people don't want to be a hypocrite. They think they're being a hypocrite by talking about the things they actually really want, that they like, that they desire. Let me ask you something. Is having a sexual appetite, being turned on by another person, is that a wrong? Is that an anti-spiritual thing? Come on, let's get real. It's a human thing. It's a natural thing. Some would say it's an evolutionary built-in structure within us to reproduce, to multiply. Let me ask you something. Is the desire to look attractive? Is the desire to make money? To enjoy some unbelievable food and drinks? To explore exotic regions of the world? To get cozy on the couch and read a book by yourself, no one around? What about throwing a loud party? Even what that involves alcohol, people drinking and having a great time. What about having delicious sex where two people feel intense pleasure between them? Are they anti-spiritual? See, I don't think they are. Now, I'm not the authority. I like to think I am. My wife tells me. But I don't think they're anti-spiritual. In fact, I think they're just part of the human experience that we need to own more and more and more. Without shame. Backed with some excitement. just set this here. And yet, every person, I bet, listening to this message this morning or on podcast at some point could likely tell a story of someone whose desire for some kind of pleasure led them to a dark place. Though the desire wasn't in and of itself evil, I don't think it was. Somehow the pursuit of that thing, the degree that they went after it, how much they wanted, whatever it was, led to some pain. You don't have to say it, but you can think it. Everyone that's seen this can say amen. It led to some undesired consequence, relationally, emotionally, financially, health-wise. For some, at some point, pleasure turned into some kind of bondage even. I think there is a good reason why. When we read cryptic passages like this, somehow in their own way, the spiritual gurus, the ninjas of our history, of our heritage, were kind of warning, going, trouble could lie ahead here. Enter with caution. Now, they had their story around that, but I think the caution I get perhaps why they're saying, careful. And Buddhism lists desire as one of the two top primary causes of suffering. Within the Judeo-Christian tradition, some leaders within the church, they compiled a list. At one point, I think it was Pope Gregory, list of the 7 deadly sins. You won't find it in the Bible. They kind of pieced it all together. But even back then, this was like 600, 880. 4 of the 7 sins, envy, gluttony, greed, and lust, all centered around one's desires, saying, oh, these things have an edge, be careful. It's hard to deny that these things that can bring us so much pleasure can also have a dark side. You know, as we're getting ready to do this, building this series, we're thinking deeply about the core competencies of spiritual ninjas, people that we have watched, leaders from way back, even to contemporaries, modern day spiritual ninjas that we look at and go, they are living life in such an enlightened, aware state. What is it? One of the big core competencies that rang out through all of them was their relationship with their desires. Their desire and their seeking after pleasure. They had a healthy relationship with those things. And I just want to talk about that this morning. In the short time I have left, what does that look like to have a healthy relationship with desire? I think one part of it, a big part of it, is even knowing what it is that lights you up. Because there's a frickin' million different things that could possibly do it out there, isn't there? My son walked up one day, my middle son, Austin, he was so focused on academics through high school, he was a natural student, but he just poured himself into it. His brothers are out traveling the world doing different things, and he's locked down working. They're like, Austin, you got to take a break. Starts up this tutoring company on the side. He's doing all this stuff, goes straight into university, gets his engineering degree. Meanwhile, his tutoring company's building. Pandemic hits. He's locked down. No fun. One day he walks up and he says, that's it, man. I'm having fun. I said, well, really? What does that look like? He says, I don't know, but I'm saying yes to anything that comes along. I hope he listens to this because we're having a great chat. He's over in Australia right now. He just says, when my friend comes up and says, let's do this, he says, I'm saying yes, saying yes, saying yes. I said, okay, that's all right. He says, I'm not saying no anymore. I'm not saying no. He wanted the family to know that. I'm on a yes mission. So he goes out. He is snowboarding trips, hiking trips, West Coast Trail. We're going out this weekend, camping. Someone calls up, I'm gone. And we're like, wait, we're about to have supper. He says, we're going swimming. We're going down the river. We're going hiking. We're going climbing. It's just like, okay. He says, I'm dating too. I said, okay, fine. Just go, whatever. One night he comes home, I'm reading, and he comes in, he goes, oh man. So what? He's like, I was determined to be able to read a book about a month. He says, I haven't been reading at all. I said, okay, you've been having a good time. And then we started talking about it. He said, my Spanish has fallen off. I haven't been learning Spanish. He says, I haven't even volunteered in a long time. I said, okay. Very quickly, he began to recognize that at some point, your pleasure seeking will require you to say no to something to say yes to another thing. Or the other, vice versa. When you say yes to something, invariably, whether you recognize it or not, you are saying no to something else. Spiritual ninjas really figure this out quickly. They recognize there's a finite amount of resources you got. Whether it's time, maybe you got all the money you need. There's time, there's energy, and there's money. And how you spend those things adds up to only so much fun, so much desire, so much pleasure. Ninjas think deeply about what it's going to be. I think about the buffet eater. There's always one of those guys. While we're getting ready to step up to the buffet line, one of these crazy long lines, and someone comes along and says, careful with that stuff, that's filler. Have you seen what's down at the other end? The expert buffet line eaters, they always never just grab a plate and start dishing up. No. They take a stroll. Have you noticed that? They look, they go, hey, what do we got here? Oh, gee. And then they'll come back to say, there's prime rib at the end. Save it. Save it. Save the space. You only got so much space. I was telling you about my buddy down in Vegas. So he gets down there. And he's so excited. They go out the first night. They visited a couple clubs, and they went hard. And Buddy went too hard. He rolled in. His partner packed it in early. She went back and got a great night's sleep. He rolled in at sometime in the morning. And the next day, he is wrecked. He is sick. Now, you don't have to show of hands, but man, if you've ever just overindulged in whatever that was his story, man. He pushed all in first night. And the next day, he was a wreck. He says, I couldn't even leave the hotel room. And my partner is so pissed off at me. She's like, everyone has been down at the pool. When are you coming down? He's like, I'm not hungry. I don't think I can handle any sun right now. She says, well, we got to go out and eat right away. And we're going to this He's like, oh, no, I don't know if I can. He almost blew the relationship out of the water. Not to mention, he wrecked this weekend by saying yes to something on the front end, not realizing he actually was saying no to a whole bunch of better stuff later. He tells that story with a pain. Spiritual ninjas are very selective. They think deeply about what pleasure they chase, what will bring them the best bang for the buck. Can I ask you something? Have you thought deeply about what it is? What are the pleasures in your life that bring you the best bang? Have you thought about that? It's important that you think deeply about this. This is spiritual business. What lights you up? What gets the endorphins flying? Spiritual question. Because you can't do it all. And you know what? There's many stories of sad people who end up spending their resources on things that other people are excited about that don't really do it for them. Know what it is for you. Maybe you got to get out and explore a bit. But you know what? It's not just about desires, is it? It's not just about knowing what your desires are. It's more complicated than that, isn't it? I know a guy whose career and the company he was building was intoxicating for him. It was what lit him up. He was so good within his business. He built this thing from a mom and pop organization up into this behemoth, both locally. Then they started acquiring companies all across Canada. This thing went massive. And he loved it. This guy won awards all throughout his industry. He would come to work, and man, people were high-fiving him. He was like just won all kinds of awards, even for being the best employer. Magazines were writing articles about this guy. He knew, man, my work, my business place, this company I'm building floats my boat. It gives me anything. And as a result, man, he just poured his life into it more and more and more. Couldn't get enough. Never felt like he was working. Loved it. Then one day, his wife sat him down at the island in his home and said, honey, I need you to hear me now. I know you're in a hurry, but I am leaving, and I'm going to take the kids with me. And it shattered his world. And what was so crazy is in that moment, it was like someone dumped some ice water over him, and he woke up and he went, wait, what am I doing? And he looked at her and he said, wait. No, don't do this. I love you more than this company. She says, no, you don't. He says, no, honestly, I do. I would sell this in a heartbeat. Please don't. But it was too late. See, it's not just about knowing what it is specifically that brings pleasure. It's also a question of, well, how much can I indulge in these pleasures? We talk a lot about this I, we, they diagram. It's a spiritual diagram that kind of outlines the goal. And by this diagram, sometimes it's not obvious, but our movement is to move up, right? The spiritual journey, a year in the gym, moving towards spiritual mastery or ninja-ry, is going up into we. It's not going back down. The ninjas live in we. They figured out how to meet their needs, but also to keep an eye on those around them that they're in a relationship with, and figure out how to harmonize so that they can stay at a higher level. That's ninja work. They're moving up the diagram. But this guy, here he has this beautiful wife, amazing family. We were very close. And then, unfortunately, he got immersed in his eye. So much so that the blinders came on, and he didn't realize how his pleasure in I started cannibalizing the they in his world. And very subtly, he started moving out of we down into I. Didn't even know it. The we just started evaporating. Sometimes in the pursuit of something that brings us so much pleasure, if it's taken too far, if we pursue it too much, if we push too far in, we cross a line. And no one really knows what that line specifically looks like, but it happens subtly, and then everything starts turning toxic. This thing you love so much gets its hooks in. There's a spiritual ninja named James in the Bible. He wrote in his words what it feels like, what it looks like when you cross that line, when you start dropping down the model. You go from I into they, or we into they, or we into I. He said there's this temptation to give in. Again, they call it evil. To give in. And that desire only comes from us. We have no one to blame but our leering, seducing flare-up of our own lust. Lust gets pregnant. He starts talking about this thing. It's like all of a sudden, you start pushing too far in, and all of a sudden the thing begins to multiply. And he says, and that little baby, it begins to grow up, and it gets loud. And it starts telling you what you're going to do. I read about lust. Lust is one of those weird things that wants to just consume and discard. Gets the blinders on and says, I just want this thing. Like this. Self-gratification. It loses sight of perhaps the other ways that your desires, your pleasure is affecting your world. Doesn't see it. Spiritual ninjas, they not only know what it is they want, they not only figure out how much of something they can have. And they start paying close attention to where that line is, where they go, I think I'm nearing that line. In the little bit of time left, I want to kind of unpack just a few things, how you can detect how close to the line you are. There are symptoms that you're nearing the line. And if you're aware of these symptoms, it can just kind of pop your head up and give you yourself an ice bath in a second and wake you up going, I got to back away a bit. Especially if you've ever gone a little too far. Let me jump into this. Warning signs. Spiritual ninjas watch for these warning signs. One, here's just an example, are your loved ones. And by loved ones, this could be your partner. This could be a sibling that knows you well, a best friend. It could be a parent. It could be your kids. Are they bothered by your desires, or are they happy that you're experiencing them? It's amazing. They can be the warning lights. Early on, I would recognize when Kathy wasn't high-fiving me on my way out the door to go golf. She would say something like, "You're going again?" Like, I'd be like, "Yeah, we talked about this. I told you." But there was hesitation there. Spiritual ninjas are constantly wrestling with this tension between what brings them pleasure and how it affects others. They're watching. They're aware. They're looking for signs. Is this working for you too? You know what's interesting is sometimes we can be in relationships where what you want is so different from what the other people in your life want. And so they're not always going to be just standing up and high-fiving you and just going, "Oh, yeah, I'm so happy that you get to go out and do that." Because often, sometimes you doing that means something they can't. But spiritual ninjas are in this we business. It's like a win-win. I'm going to do this, but hey, what are you doing? And are we making sure this is even in your eyes? Even in a sexual relationship, there are certain things that one person will enjoy that the other person doesn't. And is it just, well, too bad for you? No, there's this negotiation. It's like, I really enjoy it. What would do it for you? And it's a back and forth. Spiritual ninjas are constantly thinking, how can I put the smile on your face too? And when you do this right, you're both working to make we happen. This is a healthy thing. But there's tension there, constant. Are your loved ones bothered by your desires, or are they happy for you? Do they feel there's a sense of fairness? Secondly, how often do you feel regret after something you've done that's brought you pleasure? Does regret shortly follow? A purchase you make, it's like, oh my God, what did I do that for? Time spent with some people, you're going, why do I say yes to them? This is a lose for me. Drinking too much. We could go through this whole list. How many times after you've stepped out to experience some kind of pleasure, are you just sitting there going, that was a waste? Ding, 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 ding. Lastly, are you willing to, no, not lastly, almost. Are you willing to set limits? This is a warning sign for spiritual ninjas. Can they just say, look I am enjoying up to this point and no more? Or are you saying, I'm not willing to do that? I'm not willing to put a limit on me. COVID, if it taught me one thing, it's that I enjoy wine. And we were cooped up, and man, crack a bottle of wine on a night, or you can't go anywhere, and oh man, I love that. And then it starts becoming a pattern, and pretty soon, you know what I noticed? I noticed that certain wines I was bored of. I'm like, it's not doing it. I need something a little nicer. And once I started exhausting, then it was like, I need a little bit more. And it was funny, I got to this point where wine at one point was this pleasure that I looked forward to with people or whatever, to this point where it was just a staple that wasn't doing anything for me. It was interesting. I didn't even realize it was happening. And then I just stopped. I said, no, we're not doing this. And I said, Friday nights, we'll crack a bottle of wine. And you know what was funny? Something happened inside me. That thing that was just like, run of the mill, all of a sudden I was like, ooh, it's Friday. The pleasure centers lit up again. Are you willing to set limits? There's a law of diminishing returns with all this stuff. You step into it more and more, the less of a hit it hits. Limits can do a powerful thing. And ninjas figure this out. And they go, oh, too much of a good thing will kill me. So I'm figuring out the ways to ration this. Last thing I'll say, and just, can you say no? If you have to, can you say no? Someone once said that addiction is when you no longer have choice. When you no longer choose that pleasure, but it chooses you. It gains some kind of power over you, and you no longer have that option. You need that pleasure. Regardless of how it may be hurting you or hurting someone else. I just want to stop right here and just say, if you are listening to this, and right now you have no choice, choice has been taken away, and this thing's got you, whatever that pleasure is, and right now you're just in hiding, trying to keep this thing. I need to beg you to reach out for help. Call, email me, reach out. We have this beautiful recovery community that are so supportive, that are trying to help people who have lost choice. And slowly through process, they have regained control. They've been able to uproot this thing. And if that's you, we want to help. As I close this morning, I'd like you to think deeply about your relationship with the things and the experiences that bring you pleasure. How healthy is your relationship with that thing or any number of things that you got going in your life? I want to invite you. I want to provoke you to think deeply about climbing up the I and they into we. Finding this incredible ninja place where all of a sudden you can still enjoy these beautiful things, these amazing things that give you incredible rushes. There's no shame around them, but it's done in a harmonious way. It keeps your world intact, keeps loved ones around, keeps your world spinning. Maybe this week some of you need to just get out like my son and just explore. What is the pleasure I'm looking for most? No shame in that. For some of you, perhaps this week, you need to have a check-in with someone you love. Just to ask, how is my pleasure hunt working for you? How is my use or my search or my seek or my experiences with these things that bring me joy? Is it okay for you? Because sometimes when the blinders go on, those blind spots don't let you really see what they're thinking. Maybe there's a conversation there. Likely there's someone here listening who just needs to think deeply about the warning signs. And are you seeing them? Are you willing to put them out there? Maybe someone needs to set a new limit. I hope you do. Here's our prayer, is that each one of us will commit ourselves to more mastery, to more ninja level mastery around the desires in our lives. Because I'm telling you, we don't need to be apologizing for a lot of the pleasure that we go after, as long as we can keep it in a healthy place. That's my prayer for you. All right, that's all I got. Thank you this morning for joining us and in the gym. Hopefully this got you thinking about your assignment for this week. Next week, I'm coming back, and it is just flown over my head what I'm going to be talking about. But I am pretty... But I'm sure it'll be good, all right? Get out there, grab some cards off the trees. If you're watching this online, you can actually go online to Christmas Hampers off our website and sign up for cards too. All right, have a great week, everyone.